My name is Kenneth Paul, and this is my woodworking shop. It's a genuine pleasure to have you here. We have a fun project for you today. I make these videos to share with you the woodworking techniques and the projects I make here in my shop. Today's project is a wooden geared automata designed by Clayton Boyer. I think you're going to like this one. Let's get to it. Alright, this is where we stand so far on the project. Those of you who saw my video on using a router to put inlay designs in wood will recognize this piece. I finished the bonsai tree inlay. And here's one of the uprights. You can see what I've done here is I've added a tenon. And here's the mortise for that tenon. That allows that piece to stand in. There's the recess for the motor. This piece will go here. And right, what we have here is some ebony and some holly. This project has a little automata kitty cat in it that operates the crank. And I wanted the cat to be black and white, but I didn't want to paint. So I took a piece of ebony and pieces of holly, glued them all together. Actually, on the ebony, I didn't have any big pieces. What I had were these 10-inch pieces of 1 by 1. So I cut that into 5-inch pieces, glued that together, ripped that in half, glued that together to put 4 pieces together of the ebony, and then put a piece of holly on each side. Then I laid out the pieces for the cat to where there's a little piece of black and white on each piece, so I can have the black and white effect and not have to use any paint. On Clayton Boyer's design, this piece is done in 2 sections, a piece of 3/4 inch with a piece of 1/4 inch for the gears cut in on top. I didn't care for that look, so I cut it out of a solid piece of maple. What I did was I drilled a center hole on a board, put a router circle jig using that circle. I routed the inside of the circle only as much as to cover the gears. Then I routed the outside out, so I had this circle. Flipped it over, used the hole I had drilled through to center the circle jig, used that to center my pattern, and then cut my teeth out. Right. Now, in one of my other videos, I mentioned how I apply and remove paper patterns, and it's a good tip, so I'm going to repeat it. I use 3M's Super 77 to glue the paper down, and then after I'm done cutting out, I take just some mineral spirits, I wet the board down just a little bit, and you can see the pattern comes right off. No sanding, no scraping, a little bit of glue residue that you take off with a rag dampened with mineral spirits. This is the best system I have found for applying and removing paper patterns. Now, a word on gluing up thin stock like this. This isn't always easy to clamp. The way I handle this is I lay out my pieces on a flat board with 2 stops. I put a spacer block, leaving just enough to cut 2 pieces of shingles as wedges. Then I drive the wedges in, and it pushes these together. I put a piece of wax paper underneath and a piece of wax paper on top with a board and a little bit of weight to keep these flat. And it's an easy way to clamp together thin pieces. Now, on my video that I did for the inlaid router design, you can see I had glued together some 1/8 inch stock. This is the same technique I use for that. What I have here is some 1/8 inch sycamore. And gluing up 1/8 inch stock is difficult with clamps. What you do is you put your two stops a 1/16 of an inch closer than the width of the boards you're about to clamp. And you can see where it tense up. Now if I press down on this, that gives me the perfect amount of pressure. Oops. That one popped up. Let's try that again. Tough when you usually use two hands. Alright, hang on. Let me take this piece out. Okay. One piece, two piece. Alright. There. There. And again, I would have a piece of wax paper underneath here, a piece of wax paper on top, and then a flat board with a piece of weight. And that's a really nice way to glue really thin pieces of wood together when you need a larger piece. Alright, I'll give you a quick demonstration on the scroll saw of me cutting out some of the gears, and we'll go from there. Okay. Alright, this is my Hegner scroll saw. I'm tensioning the blade. Listen to the sound. No, no, no. Right around there. Yep, that sound, but a sharp F. That's a tight blade. That's the sound you're looking for. Alright, the blade I'm using is a Pegasus blade, a number 7 skip tooth blade. I generally use that on heavier hardwoods. Alright, I'm not going to keep cutting, it's boring just to watch me cut tooth after tooth. But that's where we stand right now. and I'll be ready to start finishing, sanding, filing, and assembling shortly. And we'll finish this video. Okay, have a good day. Alright, here's the automata. Those of you who saw my video on doing router inlays in your project will recognize this bonsai tree now completed. All right. Now you might be asking yourself, what does this project actually do? Good question. Let me show you. And there we go. No longer will I have to just stand there and dip my own tea bag. Kitty Cat will take care of that for me. It'll free up enough free time that I could solve the world peace problem. Or at least make more stupid toys. You'll see that double offset axles take a rotational force and turn it into a vertical piston. All right. All right. Let me take a moment now to address building a project from plans. When you build a project from an existing set of plans, that's only a starting point. You don't have to make your project exactly as you see it on the plans. But be cautious. The person that designed it had a reason for each thing they did. When you make a change, make sure that that change doesn't affect the functionality of the project. Like on this project, let me list the changes I've made. Small change, I made the base a little bit wider to make the inlay a little more proportional. I made the base a little bit deeper because I didn't want the motor sticking past the base. Also on the motor, originally the project shows just this toy motor sticking out of the back of the support. I didn't like looking at that metal motor looking out of the back of the woodwork. So I went through a few different designs in my mind, and I came up with what I was inspired by was the cooling fins on a motorcycle engine. So I just cut a series of discs, put spacers with a brass screw, and that covers the motor. There's a battery, a 9-volt battery underneath. In order to get the wires from the motor to the battery without being seen, because I didn't want to see them, I drilled a hole inside this back base and brought them right down underneath. I also moved the switch, the toggle switch, from the front to the back because I didn't want to see the toggle switch. Originally, this project is called to be designed with Baltic birch plywood, and the reason builders like to specify that is because it widens the amount of people accessible to build their projects, because you don't have to have any thicknessing to equipment. You can just buy the plywood in the right thicknesses, in the 1/2 inch, in the 1/4, in the 1/8, in the 3/4. But be aware, when you do decide to use natural wood instead of plywood, make sure that the short grain you're going to end up with, that is the areas where the grain is going across the teeth, that the load isn't so great on the gears you're using that you could break a tooth. On this, the load is so small, and I'm using a hard maple, so in my experience there is no problem. The cat, after having done the inlay in different colored species and having the curly maple everywhere else, I didn't want to paint. So what this cat is, if you look closely, it's the darkest gaboon ebony and holly. And what I've done is I've just joined pieces of different color wood, to create the cat. For his whiskers, I took apart a piece of telephone wire and used the little white wires. I just drilled some tiny little holes into the holly and put these little telephone wires in for his whiskers. And I have a little piece of black ebony for his nose and some little googly eyes. On the original project, this is just a round disc on this particular gear. I thought it looked better as a gear, so I use a scaled down version of this cam gear. On this project originally, the axles just go through the wood and rest on the wood. What I've done is I've mortised in 1/4 inch ID, 1/2 inch OD ball bearings, top and bottom axles. And the plans show for wooden spacers. What I've done is used metal washers with needle bearing thrust washers to take up the side load, eliminating a lot of friction, taking some of the load off that little toy motor. Also, if you look, the plans show for a 3/4 inch base for the cat, but it looked kind of blocky to me, so what I did, I cut an arc into the bottom of the base, still giving me 3/4 where it's glued in with steel pins, and that arc very much echoes the arc of the main supports. Now the cat I made is thicker than the original by about 3/8 of an inch, all told. So you have to take that into consideration to make sure you maintain your clearance, which didn't end up being an issue. Another large change to the original is this particular piece is shown as two pieces, a piece of 3/4 inch plywood and a piece of 1/4 inch plywood with the teeth in this front cover screwed on. I milled this out of a solid piece of maple, and by doing that it changes the assembly order, because this pendulum type gear, this tri gear, will not fit in from the front. You have to assemble these gears, then put this piece on screwed from the back now. Also, the original plans show for little wooden buttons to be put on to support everything. I used brass collar stops. Alright, I think those are the main differences between my design. Oh, also, the original design shows this front support mortised all the way through. What I did was I used a shouldered stop mortise. I thought it worked better in this application. And also the original plans, because it's plywood, shows two pieces of 1/2 inch plywood here. I used one piece of 1 inch maple. I'll show you the wiring on the bottom. Very simple. All right. Anyway, this is a fun little project. Again, doesn't require a lot of materials. All right, let me turn it on one more time for you. And you can see Kitty Cat in action. All right, those are my designs. Those are my design changes, I should say. Hold on, sorry about that. Okay. And again, if you'd like to build one of these for yourself, the plans are available from Clayton Boyer, B-O-Y-E-R. And like I said, make these plans your own. Make whatever changes you want to make. Like this dowel on his plans drills right through so you can see the end grain. I didn't want to see the end grain on this dowel, so I just drilled a stopped hole and glued it in because there's a screw that goes in there and 2 screws back here so you can disassemble to access your axles and gears. For a finish on this, I used General Finishes gelled varnish. It's a wipe-on varnish, 2 coats, then wax. Now I use that for all the maple because I wanted that warm amber glow that varnish gives to maple. However, for the kitty cat, I wanted that holly. I chose holly for its whiteness, and in order to maintain that whiteness, I didn't want to use a varnish which would give an amber hue to it. So I used a spray acrylic lacquer with UV inhibitor with a matte finish to spray the cat so that I could maintain that whiteness. And again, the woods for the inlay are wenge or wenge, depending on how you want to say it, and padauk. Alright, I hope you like this fun little project. And again, if you like the content I'm producing here, do me a favor, hit subscribe, leave a comment. I'll get back to you if you have any questions. Alright, thank you much. Bye-bye.